I see in the meantime that many other people are joining us. Welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to have you here today. As previously mentioned, if you just connected, today we are here with UCLA School of Law. So it's will be a pleasure to know everything about the LLM program and all the different shape and different information about this course. In the meantime, I see some people that is writing from Turkey. So hello, hi, welcome. Since today we have a really full agenda, I think that without further ado, I can now leave the floor to Tiffany for the presentation. So enjoy this webinar and see you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carolina, for the introduction and for helping to pull this all together. And thanks to everybody that's in the room right now. I know that you have probably many different things that you could be giving your attentions to. And there's a lot going on with work and life obligations and school, perhaps for some of you. So I so appreciate this opportunity to be with you. For some of you in the evening, for some of you in the morning. It's the morning for us here in Los Angeles. So I would like to, oops, excuse me. It's early, so I'm getting my vocal cords ready. So I would like to take some time to just do a really quick introduction of myself, and then here's the agenda that I'm going to go through so that you'll know what to expect for our session and our time together. So as as Carolina mentioned, I'm the Assistant Director of International Programs at UCLA School of Law in the Graduate Studies Office. That office handles the LLM program primarily, but we also are the hub that handles the doctoral degree program and our exchange program, which does a reciprocity-based arrangement between current JD students and international students at a handful of partner schools across the world, maybe about 16 institutions. So in my capacity, I primarily work with students on any alumni networking questions. If they want to tap into our network and get to know past student experiences, understand kind of what our students have gone on to do after they've graduated from the program, I'm essentially the main point of contact to facilitate those connections. I also can advise about the bar exam in terms of eligibility. I really help students understand like the timeline, the costs, the requirements, all of the different facets of just planning to take a bar exam if you're interested in gaining that licensure in the United States. And then, of course, I also assist with general student support queries. So if there's anything that you have questions about, just about life on campus, what you can have access to, who the career services contacts are, don't hesitate to reach out to me for that. I am a local Los Angeles native, so I grew up in the area. I love Southern California. I did live on the East Coast when I went to college, and then I also studied abroad in Spain. So UCLA is now home to me. I've been there for over a decade, and I love to share it with other folks. So I hope that you'll leave with kind of a better understanding of who we are. But I also want to spend some time focusing on really maybe what you tuned in for, which is like how you can improve your odds of getting into the program. So I'll give you a background about UCLA, the law school, our program, the structure, et cetera. And then I'll go a little bit deeper into the application requirements, all of the specifics, those nuts and bolts that Carolina mentioned. And then the big elephant in the room question of like how you make it happen in terms of funding and what the costs are associated with it. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for the questions that you all submit. So thanks in advance for joining. And then hopefully I'll get right to the really heavy content. So just for some context and some background, this is who UCLA is. And so UCLA stands for the University of California in Los Angeles. We are a large public institution. We have a global brand recognition. Maybe some of you have heard of us, maybe some of you have not. But we're part of the University of California system. So if you've heard of like Berkeley or UC Irvine or UC San Diego, we're all part of this statewide system of higher education institutions, and UCLA is the second institution that was established after Berkeley. And so we're about 100 plus years old. The law school is younger, but this is just to give you some context about who we are, where we rank kind of relative to well-known peers across the United States. and around the world, really. And we are based in Los Angeles on the west side of the city. Basically, we're about 15 minutes from the beach from Santa Monica, in a neighborhood called Westwood, if you're not familiar. And it's a really robust, dynamic kind of university or college town. So there's kind of all of the fixtures of a traditional US educational institution. And being a large public school means that we have access to many different disciplines on campus. There's a lot of other resources available. As you can see, there's 12 different professional schools from medicine to dental to doctoral programs. So there's a lot happening on campus. As you can see, maybe my virtual background, this is an aerial shot of UCLA. It's a beautiful campus, and we really have a strong internal community because it's part of a robust city in Los Angeles, but it is its own kind of little microcosm, little ecosystem. So it's insular, it's not spread out at separate campuses across Los Angeles. It's really just in one location, and the law school is on that campus. The law school is the highest ranked in Southern California. So we traditionally are in the top 14 law schools in the nation. Because we're young, we were founded in 1949. So we have this tradition and history, this legacy of innovation. And we have faculty coming from all backgrounds, all areas of practice and academia. So there's both adjunct faculty who are practitioners, as well as tenure track faculty who are scholars writing the books. And at the law school, we have a total population of around 1,300, 1,400 students. Of those, we're comprised of four different degree programs. So those are the JD, the LLM, the MLS, and the SJD. So I'm going to focus on the LLM program because that's what our office does, and that's really what you're here to learn about. But just so that you have some additional context about who else would be your peers if you chose to enroll at UCLA, there's around 900 JD students, a little between 900 and 1,000 JD students every year. The LLM community is about 200 to 230. You'll see that on the next slide. The MLS is the Master of Legal Studies, which are individuals who don't have a law background but want to have some training or some foundation in a law in order to kind of do some intersectional work within their disciplines. And then the SJD is the 3-year or more doctoral degree program for those who are interested in academia. So just so that you have some comparative information about our program, 200 to 230 students is usually what we're shooting for. This year's class size is a little bit bigger, but we're around that size every year. And then this gives you some context of like just how variable our programs can be relative to each other. So it's important to know what matters to you. But this is really just kind of like some additional insight for you. And then about our program itself, it is a full-time, fully residential, so in-person 9-month program, which runs from August to May. It is a program that requires completion of 22 units. So that's kind of hard, I guess, to understand if you're not familiar with the US legal system's academic structure and requirements. But 22 units really has to do with the amount of class time spent in the class. So what that generally equates to is around 3 to 5 classes per semester. So there's 2 semesters, one in the fall, August to December, and then one in the spring from January to May. The program is meant to be structured in a flexible way so that you can pick and choose whatever courses are most interesting to you. We have over 200 courses that you can choose from at the upper level, and you'll find that students are interested in kind of all manner of areas, and they're coming with all different perspectives, all different levels of experience, et cetera. If you are kind of wondering what the structure is aside from, you picking and choosing what your courses are, if you get a certificate or any specialization, know that there's 3 different approaches that you could take to pursuing the LLM. One is having a general approach, which means that's like the most flexible option. You don't have any set requirements other than an introductory course in American law. If that's, not your background, if you don't have a U.S. legal education, you do have to do one introductory course in U.S. law just so that you lay the foundation. And then, other than that, you can pick and choose from any area of the curriculum, including within specialization fields. If you decide to specialize, however, that means that you are focusing your coursework in a particular area, and we do have several specializations that you would choose from. I'll go through those in a subsequent slide. But basically, there's 4 or 5 classes that you must take in that area, 2 of which might be mandatory, and then the others of which are electives. But that still leaves room for you to take other non-specialization courses. And then the last option is to do a self-designed course of study, which means you're interested in specializing, but you don't necessarily have an interest in an area that's already reflected among our existing options. And so we've seen students do this every year. It really depends on whether we have the courses available and there's enough of them and it's not too similar to something that we already offer. So those are really the frameworks that you could use to navigate how you would structure your courses. And then one other feature that we think is really great about our program and also being at a large public institution is that we value an interdisciplinary approach to legal education. So you can take one course for credit towards the degree outside of the law school. So you could take a course at the business school, you could take a course at the School for Theater, Film, and Television, as long as there's a clear justification for why the class is relevant for your academic or professional interests. Really, that's what we want to know. And if so, and the professor grants you permission, then we would enable you to get credit for that course. So going into some of the highlights of the program, we do have a number of kind of hands-on or practical format courses, which is really important, I think, to many students to get that kind of real-world experience. So those are in the form of experiential courses like clinics or externships. And for those that don't know, a clinic basically merges the theory or the theoretical concepts you're learning in a class with practice or with some kind of real world work or project. So you're either working with a real client or a simulated client on a task. And then that kind of merges the foundations of maybe the broader topic that you're focused on for the clinic. And we offer those in all areas of the discipline, areas and disciplines of the curriculum. And then we also have externships, which is the option to work at an organization outside of the law school, but in a legal capacity that is really supervised by somebody who will be able to delegate you law-related tasks in, areas of interest to the organization, but also to you. And then you get course credit towards the degree for that work experience. So it's a great way to add kind of an additional line to your resume or your CV. And it helps you build a network by having kind of practical, real contacts in the US. We also offer priority enrollment in courses required to qualify for either the California, the New York, or other state bar exams. New York and California are the 2 most popular bar exams that are sought after by international or foreign educated law graduates. And so we walk you through every step of the way, what that requires, what that entails, if you have to take courses while you're in the program, what the cost structures are, deadlines, timelines, et cetera. So we kind of work with you on enrolling you in those courses, but we also offer informational sessions, send you a lot of emails about navigating that process. We have dedicated career counselors who work specifically with LLMs on their job trajectories, what they want to do after they've graduated from the program, if they want to be able to get additional experience in the United States. They want to meet with you. They'll do one-on-one advising, cover letter, and resume workshopping. There's a number of other workshops that are heavily focused during the fall so that you can spend much of the spring doing interviewing and preparing for opportunities post LLM. But they also make many resources available to you. We have the option for you to participate in at least 2 job fairs, one that's run by NYU and then one that is run by us. And some of those happen either hybrid, virtually, or in person. And then lastly, before I move on to the JD transfer note, we have a number of extracurricular opportunities for our students. LLMs are fully integrated into the community, so there's no separation, not even in the classrooms, between JD students and LLM students. So you have access to the same resources, opportunities, activities as the rest of the law school community. So that includes law reviews and journals. We've had LLM students act as editors or managing editors on those journals. They've also headed up some of our student organizations, which can be either identity led or kind of subject matter relevant. So, for instance, if you're interested in like international law, there's usually an association for that, or real estate or sports, et cetera. And then we have a student government called the Student Bar Association, where there's a president of the LLM community, and two additional representatives can also sign up for those roles to try to help build a more reflective community and activities for the population to make sure that all needs are being met. And then we have so many different areas of focus at the law school that they're kind of anchored by centers and institutes throughout the community. So these are faculty led. They do a number of events, talks, or symposia. They organize additional programming for students. They are also in the works of either drafting kind of substantive written works or scholarly articles. And so all of those centers and institutes have their own slate of programs and events that happen throughout the year. And then lastly, the competitions are like mock trial competitions, et cetera. So you can participate in all of those. And then there's also the JD transfer option. So for those who maybe are looking to remain in the United States on the long term, if you are an international student that is coming on a visa and you don't have permanent residency, the market is pretty challenging, and this is not UCLA specific. This is kind of nationwide. So at any LLM program around the United States, you'll find that as an international student without permanent residency, it's going to be a bit of a hurdle to remain in the United States for a long term if that's what you want to do. So the JD is usually the degree that employers are looking at in order to hire. It's not the case for all hiring, and we certainly have had LLM graduates gain gainful employment with the LLM alone. But if you wanted to apply to transfer into the JD program at the conclusion of the LLM, this is an option that is exclusive to LLM graduates only, and it can be done only during that period right after you've graduated from the program. And so it's still an application process. It is very competitive and selective, so you have to apply, but the benefit is that you don't have to submit the LSAT law school admission test, a standardized test that is a very large part of the consideration for JD admissions. But you can instead direct much of the attention onto your performance as an LLM student in our program. And you'll have the benefit of having prior experience taking courses with faculty members who could then potentially write you recommendation letters. So that is just another option. I'm happy to speak about that in further depth if you want to ask questions either during the session or thereafter. And then one of the last things that I want to kind of focus on before we begin to transition into logistics and nuts and bolts of planning an application is just what our specializations are. This is important because it helps you contextualize whether we have an offering that's going to meet your own interest areas, but it also is part of doing research about the programs that might be best suited for you. So this is just and I mentioned this earlier, you can also self-design, but these are all of the areas that we have formal existing specializations. The most popular tend to be business law and media entertainment, technology, and sports law and policy. You really don't have to have a prior background in any of these areas, if you want to pursue them, but you will have to have some clear vision of what you want to do for a select few. So pretty much there's no limitations on the number of students that we accept into the specializations, barring three different areas, and those are public interest law and policy, law and sexuality, and critical race studies. Those three, which we define as more social justice oriented, have mandatory courses that are quite small in capacity. So we do have a separate admission process for those. If you're interested in those, there is a limit or a quota on the number of students that we would accept into those disciplines. But otherwise, all of the other areas are pretty much fair game. So if you're admitted to the program, you can choose pretty much any of the other specializations that you'd like, or you don't have to specialize at all. You can just do general studies and then pick and choose from any of those courses or other areas. And like I said, we have pretty much everything under the sun. So that's just something to be aware of. And we also will usually see roughly 60 to 70% of students specializing. So know that if you don't specialize, you're not alone, but if you do, you're probably in good company with many other students who are kind of focusing their studies in a particular area. So now that we have the baseline of kind of who UCLA is and our LLM program requirements, I want to get into maybe what you're really here for, which is how to maximize your strength of your application and what all is expected in order to be a strong candidate. So the main requirement that we first and foremost relay to every potential prospective student is that you have to be eligible in order to apply to our program. And what does eligibility mean? It means that you have a first law degree or will earn a first law degree, whether that's a JD, an LLB, or some other Bachelor of Laws degree before you begin our program in August. So as long as you either already have that degree or you're going to complete those studies and get confirmation that you've graduated and you can provide proof before August, then you can apply even in your final year of study towards the degree. Um, Other than that, we don't have a work experience requirement. We have people that are coming from all age ranges at all stages of their career, at all walks of life, some right after law school, some after having worked for many years. So there's no one type of person that we're looking for. We really want, to see variety because we think that that matters for you in terms of your experience as well. And so we think you'll have a more dynamic experience, a more enjoyable experience in the classroom when you're, number one, learning from, these really top tier faculty members, but also engaging in dialogue and discussions in the classroom with people that are very different in terms of their perspectives, whether that's, bringing actual experience to the table or being fresh out of law school. So there's no licensure or work experience requirement, but you'll find that certain countries do have specific expectations, or the landscape is more conducive to you coming at specific phases of your career. So just keep that in mind that depending on your country, you might see some trends in when people decide to come after earning their law degree. But we personally do not impose any expectations about having been barred or licensed in your country as an attorney already. So if you meet the eligibility criteria and you decide, you're interested in UCLA and you want to move forward, what do we ask you to do in order to be considered? So on this list are all of the components of an application. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going into more depth about a few of them, but I want to focus kind of on the easier aspects at this stage before moving on. And by easy, I don't mean that it's, a simple process. I know that this is kind of a new experience for many of you, and applying is maybe quite different than what you're used to. So I just want to kind of clarify like what all is involved in the process. So when you apply, you're going to be asked to provide an online application where you're filling out basic biographical information about yourself. You're going to be sharing kind of short answer responses to questions. You're giving us some context about, like high level context about your work experience, educational background, contact information, things of that nature. So the online application is folded into LSAC, which I'll get into in more depth. I know that one is a little bit new, and can be a little concerning in terms of being so different of a process, but I'll get into that in a subsequent slide. The application itself is really not going to be where you spend probably as much of your time, just because these are short answer questions. You're really just ticking boxes in some cases. You're letting us know if you want to be considered for financial aid. You're providing us background information about how to contact you if you have interest area that you may want to specialize in, things of that nature. The resume or CV is pretty straightforward. It's really you providing a resume or a CV in whatever format you're accustomed to, as long as it includes your work experience, if you have any, your educational background, and any skills or honors or accolades that might be relevant, kind of as like a bird's eye view. So if you have maybe more of an academic career, you're interested in pursuing a doctoral degree, or maybe you already have a doctoral degree, the longer CV format may be a better fit. The traditional US style with a resume is usually one page, but that again is really up to you and your own background. So it's really you deciding what makes the most sense off of your own personal experience. And we don't usually require that you share kind of biographical data about yourself other than contact information on the resume. So sometimes we've seen that students will share like a photo of themselves. And if that is the standard protocol in your country, feel free to do it, but it's not required. So again, just know that it's really meant to be a high level snapshot of the experience that you have, both educational and work, and helping us to understand the value of that kind of in bullet point format. So that is something that you would then provide. The personal statement I'll go into in more depth, but that's really a statement about why you're interested in coming to our institution or what you expect you can achieve with a degree from our institution. And then transcripts are kind of all of a snapshot from your university of all of the coursework that you've completed, the grades that you've received. And if it's not in, English as the native language, then it's translated into English as well. So we want to get a sense of your academic credentials and performance. That's something that you would request from your university and any university really that you attended, not just law, but where you earned a degree. So say you did a master's in a non-law field, but you have a bachelor's of law. And that's why you're planning to kind of come to the LLM. So you would want to share both the transcripts for your law degree and that master's level coursework so we have a more comprehensive view of your academic capabilities. And then two letters of recommendation, I'll get into, choosing recommenders on the final slides. And then TOEFL or IELTS scores are required as proof of English proficiency. So really, we only accept those two methods of gauging English proficiency if English is either not your native language or you did not earn a law degree from an institution where English was the primary language of instruction. So if that's the case, then you would need to take a TOEFL exam, and it cannot be older than 2 years at the time that you apply. So if you maybe are applying and it's like just over 2 years, you can write to us, but really we want the scores to be no older than 2 years once you click submit on your application. But yeah, if you earned your law degree from an English speaking institution, then you're exempt and you just check a box on the form that we can later verify through receipt of your materials. What we say is competitive on the TOEFL is usually scores of 100 or higher on the internet-based test. I know that the TOEFL exam is changing, so there might be a little bit new information, and we'll update our details on our website about that once folks begin kind of switching over to the new format. And then IELTS is a 7.5 or higher is competitive. That doesn't mean that you are not going to be eligible to be considered if you have scores below that. But if you do, then we want to make sure that your English proficiency is strong in all other aspects of your application. So just keep that in mind. We have accepted students that have had scores below both of those thresholds. So it's not going to preclude you from being considered. And then on the academic piece, the transcripts, we are usually looking at scores of a 3.0 on the US grading scale or B average or higher. As competitive, but the same rule applies where you're not restricted from applying if you don't meet that criteria. Every country, every school has a different grading criteria. So we will do the internal assessment about the equivalency of your grades relative to the US grading system. Don't worry about having to convert your scores or anything like that when you apply. We'll be able to do that on our end. So now I want to focus more on a few of the components that typically we get quite a few questions about. So I'll focus now on LSAC, which stands for the Law School Admissions Council. It is a third-party organization whose role is to help streamline the application process for students. It helps give you more information about law schools that you might be interested in. They organize a slate of programs in terms of fairs so that you can meet and get to know various law schools. And they also have a candidate referral system, which you can sign up for once you create an account. And that will allow you to get contacted by law schools that meet whatever criterion that you set. So if you're interested in, say, environmental law, you can be contacted by schools that have these kinds of programs. So it's really a good third-party hub to give you information, but it is also a method that most US law schools use to process admissions and process application materials for both the LLM and the JD programs. So when you apply, we are going to ask that every applicant applies through LSAC rather than directly to UCLA. So that means you're not sending us any of your application materials. Everything is going first to LSAC. And the benefit of that is because they're so widely utilized by all US law schools, or most US law schools rather, once you submit your documentation, they have the ability to generate multiple reports to go to each institution that you indicate. So you really only have to, obtain documentation once rather than trying to get different copies of the same materials sent to each institution separately. So it streamlines the process for you a bit. So that's the benefit. And it also will give you a very clear checklist of, how to submit your documentation, what's required, if you're going country by country of what documentation you need to prove that you meet the eligibility criteria and what transcripts you need to obtain. They have that outlined on their website. We also link to it on our own website. So you can use that. And then they also have this international transcript authentication and evaluation service, ITAES, which for us is optional. There is an additional fee for it. Sometimes it can help expedite the processing of your application because it consolidates much of the information about your academic records into a more US friendly report in terms of comparing your education to like a US legal education. So that can streamline things, and maybe some schools will require it, but we do not. So know that that is not a necessary feature. There is an additional fee for it. So if you choose not to, you will not be penalized in any way. I should note that speaking of fees, we do not charge a fee at UCLA to apply to our program. I know some schools do. So when you're using LSAC, you have to pay a fee to create an account. That is paid directly to LSAC, not to UCLA. And then for each report that you transmit to a school, you'll have to share, a certain amount for each of those transmissions. So that is going to be the bulk of the cost that you'll see around your application, the creation of your account for this document assembly service, and the report transmission fee. But other than that, there's no other fee that you're paying to UCLA in order to have your materials reviewed. We really want to make this as easy as possible for you to, receive, instructions and also to get your documentation over to us. So this is kind of LSAC in a nutshell. I know that it can still feel a bit overwhelming, but they do have checklists and instructions on their websites about how to navigate each stage of the process in terms of transcripts, recommendation letters, etc. So be sure to review that as well as what's listed on our website. The next piece I want to focus on is the personal statement, which I think is quite different maybe for many students in terms of, what evaluation criteria we're looking at and what impact it can make on your application. It may be a bit of a foreign concept, but it's essentially an opportunity for you to share why you're interested in our program and give us more information that you think that we should know that will help us understand why it's a good fit for you. So I usually say that the personal statement is your chance to kind of sway the committee, which ultimately will review your application in one direction, and you can have a bit of a good impact on how you're perceived if you use this as an opportunity not only to clarify, things about you that we may not know from other aspects of your application, but also you help us understand why this is a good fit, a mutual fit between you and UCLA, as well as an opportunity for you to showcase your English proficiency skills because it is a written statement. So what is it? It's, for UCLA, 3 pages, double spaced, 12-point standard font. And we don't have like a formal set of questions that we ask you or prompts that we ask you to respond to. But we do have a bit of a guide on our website about what you should be focusing the components of your personal statement on. And so I always say follow the instructions that are listed on our website and answer any kind of general tone or questions that we mention. And this is the same for other universities that you may be considering as well. So why UCLA? What kind of contribution you will make to the law school environment, to the legal profession, how you envision that you will use the experience as an LLM to propel you onto the next stage of your career. All of those are things that are really important to us to help us understand how this fits into kind of the puzzle pieces of your trajectory. So to the extent that you can answer those things, you can frame it in whatever way you like. It can be kind of more flowery, descriptive language, or it can be super direct, as long as it's well written. That's really what we care about. It's important that you do your research. You know what we have on offer. So that's why I spent a little bit of time at the beginning of this session going over the specializations and how we're structured so that you understand our community and what we have available. So that you know how what your interests are interplay with what we have available to you. Tell us something that we don't know. So try not to be duplicative of anything that you're already sharing. Or if you are sharing information that we already know, make sure you're elaborating in a way that is beneficial or helpful to us so that we can see that you are expanding upon an idea that maybe we didn't have the full picture of. And this is really key in like 2026 and kind of the way that technology has evolved. You see the prevalence of AI and ChatGPT. We say only use your original work. Do not use these extra tools, these AI tools to help you write your statement. You should be writing it yourself. You can certainly have others proofread them for you. And you can always modify and tweak once you have like a copy editing eye come to it. But write it yourself in your own words. We don't want you to regurgitate things that have been entered into like a chat bot and then spit out. And we can actually tell the difference between something that's more personally written than something that is using language pulled from like a chat GPT or AI portal. And then the last piece is make sure to edit always. It's a reflection of your English abilities as well, your grammar. Make sure there's no spelling errors. Make sure that when you have others read it, that it sounds like you. You want to make sure that you're conveying things about yourself, in an accurate way. And so getting feedback is great. That's one area where we don't have, any negatives to advise you on it. We think it's a good idea to get feedback, but then to still always just write it yourself and you can tweak and modify. So that's the personal statement piece. And then the recommendation letters component usually is one that students want to know like who they should be getting to do the references, how they choose them, how many they have to get. So every school's requirements are different. I always say start with the instructions, which is the same advice from previous slides. Always make sure you're reviewing what we ask for first and foremost. We say you have to provide two as a minimum and up to four, but two really is totally sufficient. We usually prefer to see at least one of those two being an academic source or a scholarly source, somebody who knows you in an academic setting, like a professor. We understand that doesn't necessarily work for everybody if you don't have a close relationship with a professor, but have the discretion to determine of professional versus academic references if there's people who know you best to make sure that you are following through with individuals who have your best interests in mind, that understand why you're doing the program, things like that. And make sure you're following the submission protocol, meaning you're submitting them through LSAC. And there's two different ways that this can be done. It can either be done by having the recommenders mail in their reference letters directly to LSAC via postal mail, or you indicate their emails in the online application form, and that auto generates an email to them requesting that they complete the submission process. So if their reference is not in English, you'll need to make sure that they're accompanied by an English translation. And then that they maybe include whatever cover sheet might be required through LSAC. UCLA does not have a specific cover sheet they have to complete, but just know that that could be a process that you might have to follow. This is one of the areas, along with transcript, that takes the most time. So give yourself a lot of time, I would say months, to find and identify a recommender, academic or professional, people who know you well, that understand why you want to do an LLM, and then to ask them, to do it with them having enough time to devote, some meaningful time in what could be a busy stage in their own lives to writing something that is persuasive for you. You want to focus on, or they want to focus their letter of you on your academic capabilities, your performance, your achievements, what you bring to the table. They can emphasize things from English proficiency to your ability to process and synthesize really complex legal information, how you work with your peers. All of that is important for how you interact as a student in our community. So making sure that you advise them appropriately on what they should be focused on. And then choose those individuals carefully. Know who really is invested in your success and making sure that they have a clear understanding of who you are. You don't want some generic letter that anybody could have written. You want people who know you well. So professors, supervisors, colleagues, clients, anybody who understands your work and your capacity to perform in a rigorous setting. Does prestige matter of the individual you choose? This may be a bit controversial, but not really. We want to have an individual who knows you really well write a reference more than we want the title of the person who's writing the recommendation letter to be, particularly well renowned. So say you have a partner of a law firm or like the dean of a law school who you're eyeing to ask for a recommendation letter. If they don't know you well or haven't worked with you, they're really not going to be able to give us much context about you. So be very discerning about who you choose, because we would rather have the individual who knows you, and knows your work than the title of the person writing it. And again, the process is submission through LSAC. Okay, so what is the timeline? We have one intake per year. As I mentioned, we start in August and we conclude in May. So we always have one admission cycle that happens at the same time every year, which is from September to February. It's an online process. The deadline is always February 1st, and in some cases, we may extend the deadline or accommodate late submissions based on maybe what's happening in your own life. But for the most part, the deadline is going to be February 1st of the year that you intend to begin. So for 2027 to 2028, so you want to start in August 2027, the deadline is going to be February 1st. So you want to make sure that you're planning your application to fall during that window. And there's two things that you should keep in mind. There's things that you can control, and there's things that others control. So you control the online application, the resume, the personal statement. You can upload those yourself at a moment's notice. Others control your university transcripts, your reference letters. You have to schedule and get a good score on an English proficiency exam. So those are going to take much more time, and the processing timelines for universities to issue transcripts to anybody other than the student sometimes can be quite lengthy. So I would say start by reaching out to the universities first and foremost, usually early on, maybe in September, if you want to start after our application period has opened. And then make sure you look at the calendar for when the TOEFL or IELTS exams are offered so that you could take that score or take that exam if you haven't done so already within enough time to get the results, decide if it reflects your abilities or if you want to, retest again. And then the recommendation letters, as I mentioned, you want to give your recommenders enough time to really understand what it is they're asked to do and to get that documentation to LSAC. Once we have your materials, because we make decisions on a rolling basis, we are reviewing applications as they come in from throughout September all the way through to April. So the decisions that we normally issue about whether you've been accepted or not is from January through April. So the sooner you apply, the sooner you'll hear from us. The later you apply, it's more likely that you'll be on the later end of the notification timeline. So if you have questions about any of that, don't hesitate to reach out to us so that we can advise on, the timeline or any other aspects of the application. So now for the financial piece, I want you to understand kind of what the costs are of our current year or upcoming year's program are estimated to be. So we are roughly looking at around $80,000 for just the tuition of the program. So that's kind of the academic experience itself, not living expenses, which are roughly 28,000. Los Angeles is a major metropolitan city, so obviously with that comes varied quite variable budgets about how you want to live. So this number is an estimate. It can be quite different from student to student. It can be much higher. It can be a little bit lower, but this is really the average moderate student budget, 28,000. So you're looking at anywhere from, I'd say, 100,000, 10 to up or upwards of that for the full year in the program. So that's quite a big investment. And we do view this as an investment rather than just a cost because it's an investment in your future. It's an investment in, yourself and using it to go on to do other things that are maybe more aligned with what your long-term objectives are. So this is just so that you have some context about how much you're going to potentially need. And we want every student to understand this thoroughly so that they're not caught off guard, so that they know what they're really going to have to prepare for. And this could take maybe a year or 2 years or a few years to plan. So just know that this is the framework from which we're starting. So what funding do we have available? We have three different forms of financial aid. We do allow students to work on campus if they are international. If you're not an international student, then there's no limit on the type of work that you can do. But if you're an international student, you can work on campus on a part-time basis up to 20 hours per week in any area of the university. So as long as they're hiring student workers, you're welcome to work in any capacity. That's where there's a benefit of coming to a large public institution because you could work at the law school as a research assistant capacity, for instance, or you could work in like the bookstore in a different department as a TA, et cetera. So the university aid is fellowships, on-campus work, and then there's non-university resources, which you would have to look for privately or separately. But we do offer a link to those, which is on our website. It's not at all exhaustive because there are essentially infinite possibilities country by country, but we do have on our financial aid section of the website, you can go and see what resources are available either generally for US versus international students or country by country where we know that students have gotten funding in the past. You want to look at third-party private institutions like lenders, government entities. Sometimes you're also using personal savings, family support, et cetera. Most of our students, if not all, are merging various sources of funding in order to cover the cost of the experience. So keep that in mind that you'll probably have to identify multiple sources in order to cover the cost of the program. And then going into the fellowships, I'm going to focus on the two that are full tuition on a separate slide, final slide. But the Dean's Tuition Fellowship is one that every applicant is automatically eligible to be considered for. So that is a partial aid fellowship. It is one that is based on your merit and your financial circumstances. So when you apply, you essentially will check a box that says, please consider me. You don't have to submit a separate application. We're really just going to look at the components of your application to gauge your merit and anything you disclose to us about your financial circumstances. But these are awards that typically fall in the ballpark of 20% to 40% of the cost of tuition. In some very exceptional circumstances and cases, we have half fellowships that we grant to students. So half off of that roughly $80,000 is what you can expect to get in the best case scenario. And then you'll, have to still cover your living expenses in the remainder of the non-fellowship covered portion of tuition. So keep that in mind that even with our fellowship, you still will have to cover your living expenses. And then if you're getting, third parties, they're going to have to kind of pull together separate funding sources for those. So now I'm going to focus a bit on the two full tuition awards, which are very, very limited and highly competitive. So This is the last slide, and then I'm going to be willing to turn it over for questions. But basically, the full tuition fellowships are substantive area of the law based, and that means that you have to have an interest in those areas in order to pursue them, and backgrounds in those areas to pursue them. So this is just a rough overview. The eligibility criteria is the same essentially as what it is expected to be eligible for our program. Strong academic records, but you have to show that you have a background in whether that's coursework or work experience, being committed to these disciplines and advocacy work in these areas in your own country. So you'll have to show a commitment to either, race discrimination if you're interested in critical race studies, or to health and human rights, gender equality if you're interested in the health and human rights fellowship. There's a mandatory certification that you have to complete that says you will return to your country after you've earned the degree in order to pursue advocacy in those areas. And then there's a supplemental application and an interview process for each one. So because these are full tuition, they are very limited. Again, no living expenses are covered, but it's a big weight off of your shoulders to have full tuition covered. I would say roughly 2 to 4 students out of those 200 to 230 students get these fellowship awards. So as you can see, that's extremely competitive. So if you have questions about that, we have a member of our team who really addresses most of those concerns. This is her contact information, fund sale at law.ucla.edu. And so you'll have to reach out to her if you have specific questions, but these again are just 2 other avenues to kind of help cover the cost for students that are interested in more social justice work. So I will leave it there. I know that we have maybe just a few minutes and maybe a lot of questions, hopefully, but I will turn it over to Carolina, and I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer if need be. I know that some of you may have other commitments to get on to, but now I will open it up for questions and any feedback that might have come through.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. It was really a great presentation full of many, I think, useful information. I see that the students were pretty interested, and of course, they have questions, but it's normal. In this case, I'd like to mention to all the students connected before we start with the Q&A session that you will receive an email in the next few days in which you can click on the YouTube link with this webinar recorded. So if you have missed anything, if you want to watch this webinar and take some more information, you can do it by click on the link and see the video. And also you will receive all the contacts from UCLA School of Law. So if you have any other questions, also specific, for example, to your situation, to your background, you can do it by writing to the team that is always very available and kind. So for sure, they will answer to your questions. Okay, so I think that we can start with the first one. That is about the opportunities for the LLM students to participate in legal clinics or pro bono projects during their year in LA.
Yes, there are opportunities to do that. So you might recall from one of the earlier slides, I mentioned there's experiential offerings. So you can participate in clinics. Those are in the form of either student-led, which are not for credit, or there's course credit clinics, which are taught, and sometimes those will come with application processes. We'll explain what those are during the enrollment process. You can apply for them for either the fall or the spring or both. But basically, yes, there are clinics that have that practical hands-on experience. And we do have a pro bono office, which usually is housed under the wing of the public interest law and policy, or the Epstein program of public interest law, where they basically will share information about any opportunities that are affiliated with the law school or not affiliated with the law school, but local organizations to complete pro bono work, which is work in service of underserved or marginalized populations. And then that potentially can count for credit towards, say, New York bar eligibility, or admission requirements, rather, for those that are not familiar with pro bono. It is one of the requirements that you have to fulfill in order to be eligible to gain admission to the New York bar.
Perfect, thank you. And another one is, how active is the UCLA alumni network globally, and how can LLM students leverage this connection even once they return to their home countries?
I would say very active. Our office is actually kind of a full service office, meaning that we don't really just work with you at this application or prospective student stage. So we work with you as a prospective student when you're first getting to know us, trying to understand the application process, but then we also work with you once you're enrolled as students and then after you've graduated. So as I mentioned, I'm the liaison between current students or prospective students and our alumni. We usually organize events for alumni around the world, either engagement opportunities or an opportunity for our alumni to connect with admitted students twice per year. So once in the fall, once in the spring. Right now, we're actually planning dozens of events around the world, and we invite alumni to join in those every time we have them. We also have social media groups with our LLM alumni involved, so that's on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Um, and we also will help facilitate contact if you're, say, looking for, a way to reach out to fellow alumni. I would be the first point of contact for that. So you can reach out to me and say, hey, I want to connect with somebody who specializes in international and comparative law, and is from, say, Brazil. I can search our database, reach out to the individual, and then put you in touch, assuming they give permission to do so. We also have a UCLA Law network that you can subscribe to that is through a LinkedIn platform. So there's many ways to get involved. And then we obviously encourage that. We want there to be continuity between our various communities all around the world. I'm actually leaving to go to the United Kingdom and many other places tomorrow. So it's just a reflection of like the ways that our office connects with alumni. Our admitted students and our alumni are going to be in the same space for receptions and events. We also promote anything that we are organizing.
Thank you, amazing. And I know that you already talked about the cover letter and the things that the students need to submit. A student is asking what qualities does UCLA are looking for in strong candidates? If you have any suggestion, maybe.
Yeah, so it's a bit difficult to point to one specific thing, but I think, because we want people that are unique and true to themselves, because we value again that diversity of perspective, of experience. No two students need to or should look alike. We want you to bring your own unique perspective into the classroom and be confident in that. So I think a self-assuredness is important, having confidence in knowing exactly what you want. Obviously, we look at your academic credentials to see whether or not you're going to perform well in an academic setting. So we want to know that you're going to be able to handle a rigorous, challenging environment. So, if you have strong academic background, meaning that 3.0 or a B average or higher, that's important. If you have strong English proficiency, that's important. All of your work is going to be conducted in English. The environment is going to be fully in English. So that can all help boost your application's competitiveness, but really knowing exactly what it is that you want and understanding what we offer and how that plays together with your vision of where you see yourself going. Having that clarity is really important in emphasizing that fit in your, say, your personal statement. And that's how we really understand that you've done your due diligence, you understand what we offer, and you know where you can fit in on the spectrum.
Thank you. And previously, we were mentioning something about the different specialization, and the student is asking if my career goals bridge between two different fields, for example, intellectual property and international business. How much freedom do I have to build a custom curriculum instead of sticking to a single predefined specialization?
A lot of flexibility. So we don't have a set requirement that you do a specialization. So, like I mentioned earlier, if you do general studies, that gives you the most flexibility. So, you don't have to do any mandatory courses during the academic year that are not things that you're choosing for yourself. So, you could be picking and choosing any manner of courses across the curriculum that speak to both of those interests or even others. Sometimes people want to be able to qualify for a bar. So, they'll take bar courses while also planning for another specialization. If you wanted to specialize, know that you can do a dual specialization. So two is the most that you could do. But you can, say specialize in business law, and you can also specialize in environmental law. But know that that might mean that you have a slightly heavier course load. If you want to specialize and do a bar, I would recommend only one specialization because the bar courses often don't overlap if you're planning for New York specifically with the actual specialization courses. So you would have a quite full load. But we encourage you to span the curriculum, embrace your interests. There is really built-in structure to do that because specialization is only 4 courses. You usually will need around 8 courses to earn the degree.
Thank you. And now I see the last two questions, actually. The first one is if you help students in finding accommodations in LA.
Great question. So we do have some resources that we share with students regarding housing in LA. We understand that for many of you, this will be your first time to the United States or to California or even to Los Angeles. So understanding like the various neighborhoods and the proximity to our campus is really important. So we will send you a guide that basically outlines the different neighborhoods that are closest to campus and where students tend to look. And we'll also have a platform that's dedicated specifically to allowing students to see where past students have lived and engage with them to get feedback on where they should go, if they have any recommendations. There's a discussion board, things of that nature. So not only will it have listings of places around the community that you can search, that's separate from kind of these private third-party sites that you also can use. And we do recommend doing kind of an extensive search. But that's really a good way to get more kind of UCLA insight from past students about where they chose to live and why. And then we do have university housing available for students. It's not guaranteed because there are so many students at UCLA. We have like 13,000 graduate and professional students at UCLA as a whole, but you can apply for housing whether you're a student coming on your own as a single student or if you're coming with a family. There's university housing for single students and housing for graduate students, and it's a lottery-based process. So as long as you get your application in within the time frame that's usually set around late spring, early summer, you will be entered into the lottery and will be assigned a placement if you are able to get off of that list, the lottery list, into an offer, and then you can decide whether or not to choose to take up that offer or not. Many students do decide to live in private off-campus housing because it's kind of comparable or comparative in cost to the university housing. And if you do that and you want the same kind of experience, Westwood tends to be the neighborhood that most students will look in.
Thank you. And I think that we can conclude with a funny one that is, how's the life in LA? Is it similar to the movies like we are used to see?
That's a great question. I think I have a very different experience being a local, but I think people love Southern California and Los Angeles for good reason. I'm biased, I know this because I'm from here, but I think it is a beautiful city with a lot to offer and many different things that appeal to people from different backgrounds and interests. So I wouldn't say it's like you're living on a movie set, but you will feel like, hey, I've seen this area in a movie before because they do a lot of filming around Los Angeles and on campus, even at UCLA. Like you might notice that some of our iconic buildings show up quite frequently in TV shows and in movies because number one, it's just a beautiful campus, but also we're in the heart of Hollywood and where movies are made. So it's not uncommon to see many different places reflected in the TV shows and movies that you've seen. But there's something for everybody. There's a lot of recreational outdoor activities. If you're interested in surfing, if you're interested in snowboarding or skiing, we have all of the topographical and climate variation that you want to experience where you can surf, in the morning or in the afternoon, and then you can also ski or go snowboarding in the same day because we really have all of these microclimates. There's a lot of hiking. There's really great food, a lot of cultural activities and events, not just around the city, but on campus as well. So there's like more to do than probably what you have time to do, but we think it's the best place to have kind of a truly cultural experience where you can get to know people from all over. It's very welcoming. Los Angeles has a lot of different communities and ethnic groups spread throughout the city. There's Japantown, there's Little Ethiopia, there's a Little Armenia. So there's all kinds of countries that kind of merge together in Los Angeles. And you'll find like community there that way too. If you're ever feeling kind of homesick, you can probably find your community here as well. But we think it's great, and that transfers also to life on campus.
Thank you so much. In the meantime, I just shared in the chat the link to get the certificate. If you want, you can click on it and request it. So I would say that before we say goodbye, Tiffany, any last minute suggestion, anything that you want to communicate to students before we close?
Yeah, well, I want to commend you for taking the time to even come to this session. I think getting information is like half the battle. So kudos to you for taking the time out of your schedules to learn and to get a feel for whether or not we might be the right fit for you. I think when you're starting to think about planning for LLM program and planning to apply, what's really important is just making sure that you have all the answers that you need. So I want to make myself available. I know you'll get our contact information, but make myself available to you at any point if you have questions along the way. That's really what we're here for. And like I said, we kind of work with students throughout the process. So we're not going to disappear after you apply. We're really going to be working with you as a student, as an alum. So don't hesitate to feel like you can't contact us for any type of question. And then also to plan early. Like, I think really timing is what stresses a lot of people out. So the sooner you start the process of preparation, the less stress I think that will create for you and trying to track down recommenders or get, your university to send documentation through to LSAC. So starting early, I think will help you feel better able to manage all that is involved in this kind of very complicated and complex multi-part process.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Of course, I'd like to thank Tiffany for the presentation, for all the information, for being here with us today. And again, we would like to thank all the students connected. It was a pleasure for me hosting this webinar. And of course, we hope to see you very soon. So have a nice rest of the day from wherever you are from. And goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you as well.